Welcome to another episode of Getting Your Shit Together. I'm your host, Neil, and today we are diving into one of the most popular ways to build wealth, investing in real estate. Whether you're considering your first property or you're curious about the different ways to get involved in real estate market, this episode is for you. We're going to cover the basics, like why real estate is such a powerful investment tool, the different types of properties you can invest in, and the various approaches, whether you're looking for a hands-on experience or prefer a more passive way to grow your money. We will also talk about what kinds of return you may expect and the risk that you would have to be aware of before you take the plunge. It's a lot to cover, but we will break it down step by step to give you a solid foundation. Hey Jerome, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Neil. Thank you for asking.
I'm sure a lot of our viewers would be wondering about this topic. We are in the year 2024, and it has not been a great year if you have invested in real estate. In fact, I've talked to a lot of people who appear to be have been burnt or are just sored at the idea of investing further in real estate. So, what do you think? Is this a dead topic?
Ooh, you picked a good time for it, that's for sure. I agree. There are a lot of people who have gotten into this and they've questioned why, maybe over the last couple of years, because we've seen some very tumultuous times in the real estate market and with interest rates. So many people may have bought low and experienced the increases in the rates and terms and things like that. So it's been a bit of a challenge. But then there are a lot who have overcome it by thinking a little bit forward and planning a little bit differently, not so much for the influx of cash flow today, but for the long run. So we're going to touch on a couple of different topics today or approaches rather, and see which one makes sense for you. And if you're still not sure at the end of this, you know two people who can walk you through the process and help you decide if this is a right avenue for you.
Yeah. Well, I think what people tend to forget is everything moves in a cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And we are just at that stage in that cycle where things look all doom and gloom.
Yeah.
But things will change. And maybe in a few months or years, you would still be at the top of another frenzy where people are chasing to get into the market.
Yep.
But it's always a good time to relook the basics and see as to what are the fundamentals of a real estate investment portfolio and how should people approach it. And so that's the goal of today's episode.
Yeah.
So let's start with maybe discussing investments in general and why real estate investing is meaningful. So, of course,
good place to start.
Yeah. So the first thing that we should address is why should anybody invest in any asset and not just keep the money under their mattress?
It could get a little bit flat under the mattress, and that's very both literal and figuratively speaking. And by flat, I mean it doesn't gain you anything to sit there, right?
Yep.
So when you invest in anything, whether it be a stock, a GIC, or real estate, you'll earn something on that investment.
Mm-hmm.
Some investments are very hands-off. You may deal with a financial advisor who takes your investment personality into consideration and determines where to invest money that you give to them, and then they promise a certain type of return. And the same thing with real estate. You know, you could purchase a property and look at it from what am I earning today or what am I going to earn in the future, and be both hands off or not. You know, you may want to control the process a little bit more. So real estate has great potential for long-term appreciation, much like others, and wealth building. It just happens a little bit differently than some things.
Yeah, what I tend to like about real estate is the sort of a hedge against inflation. So not only is the asset or the investment giving you returns, maybe in form of rental income or interest income, or depending on the kind of investment you make.
Yeah.
But also that the asset itself appreciates and usually is ahead of the inflation, which means your wealth is protected against inflation. So, for example, if the inflation is maybe at 3% and the asset rose at 5%, then you're still ahead by about 2%.
Yeah. And people will always need a place to live. So
Yes,
the
absolutely.
demand for the real estate is always going to be there, especially in Canada.
Mhm. So we talked about the long-term appreciation aspect, the wealth building aspect, inflation aspect.
Yeah.
And there are also some tax advantages too, right? Like any other business, investing in real estate gives you access to concepts like depreciation, wherein you can depreciate the value of an asset, not the land, but the building or the structure on it.
Yeah.
And you can claim a tax reduction every year in your tax filing.
Yes.
Expenses are also tax deductible. So things like property taxes, any utilities that you might be covering for the tenants, whatnot is repairs and maintenance. They're all taken out of your income before you have to pay tax on it. I like all these concepts.
Yeah. I mean, effectively, when you buy a rental property, even though it is deemed like an investment, similar to stocks, bonds, and all that other stuff, it's a little bit more than, because you can't necessarily write off all of the expenses that you might incur when buying a stock.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you were to buy a stamp and use it to send your financial planner a note, you can't write that off, but you can if it's a property or real estate. So
Mm-hmm.
effectively, you're buying a mini business when you own real estate. And that's another advantage because it allows you to leverage some aspects of it as well.
Yeah, which brings to the concept of leverage,
Mm-hmm.
which is that you're buying this asset most likely with some sort of financing in play, especially investment properties. And so just putting in maybe 20% of the value of the purchase in form of a down payment, we are able to have 100% control of the asset.
Yes.
Right. So, and that gives you, or that amplifies the outcomes. Now, it can be a gain or it can be a loss as well. But still, there is an amplification or a leverage aspect, which again can do wonders. Now, let's maybe talk about the different kinds of real estate. Right. Generally, when people talk about real estate or buying and selling, they're looking at just houses.
Mm-hmm.
But real estate is beyond just houses, right?
Really? Can it include a tent in the backyard?
Well, it can include the land.
Yeah.
Right.
But that actually brings something very, very specific. Something that has come out recently is lenders and the government are now allowing for people to build small, like laneway properties in behind your house for increasing the density of population in certain areas. So
so cities are encouraging garden suites, or maybe conversion of any space that you can find, even garages into living spaces nowadays.
Yeah. You might just have to go with something electric for the heat in the tent. But there's all kinds of different property types. For residential, as you were going to mention, I think, Neil, there's obviously your single family homes. There is townhouses, row houses, which can be deemed freehold or condominium. There's even condominium style in apartments, both low and high rise. And then there's the non-single, which are duplex and triplexes and things like that, which
we tend to call it as multifamily. And again, those could be smaller multifamilies or maybe even apartment buildings.
Exactly. Yeah. So many different options.
Yeah. And so those are mostly the kind of real estate which is used for people to sort of reside in, right, as their residence.
Yeah.
And then you have other kinds of real estate, like an office building.
Yep.
Or a commercial storefront, malls, hospitals.
Yep.
Senior living homes.
Yes.
Storage locations.
Yep.
hotels. And generally, people tend to focus on just the residential part of it, or that's the most in demand piece of it. But there is a lot that you can explore and create a niche for yourself in.
Yeah. I think part of the reason why people will focus a lot on residential specifically is because, in fairness, in a lot of cases, there is a lower entry point. As you mentioned, the 20% down would be if you're just going in first flush buying an investment property that's residential. But could you convert an existing home into an investment property? For sure, you could. Could you buy a house today, live in it for a couple of years, and then turn it into an investment property later, and then buy another home? Yes, you could.
Yep.
There are some criteria to look at with that. It's not, it's not as easy as I'm making it sound. There are some things that you have to consider and some disclosures that you have to make. So let's make sure that I'm being very clear. We're doing things above board here. When you're looking at commercial properties, the entry point tends to be a little bit different and higher in most cases. So, it might be you start with residential, get a couple under your belt, and then start looking at something a little bit larger or a little bit different that may have some different elements that appeal to you.
Yes, for sure, it has looked more like a business and evaluated more like a business by lenders. So, before a bank gives you the money for the in terms of the financing to purchase a commercial property, they most likely want to know that you are capable of running such an enterprise, right? Because it's essentially a business. So, what is the business model? How are you going to make money? How are you going to ensure that you're going to pay back the bank? And so all of that needs to be proven. And so having some sort of background or experience definitely helps. Now, we talked about investing in real estate by buying the asset. Right? But there are other ways to also participate, which is in the form of maybe more income generating activities. Like flipping homes. Right? That's one area where you don't necessarily have to buy and hold the property, but you could be buying properties which have a potential to add value in. You could be renovating and then selling it in the short term.
We know somebody who this year purchased a property at a relatively lower rate than what the market would have supported because the seller was mostly interested in liquidating as fast as possible. So the property was also dated, so it did need some upgrading. And the buyer that you and I know was willing to go into this, partner up with a contractor, get the work done. They financed it all privately and then listed it. I think the buy-in initially was like $450,000, and then the sell after $120,000 to $140,000 renovation was close to $800,000. I think it was like $785,000 or something.
Okay.
And they did it in like 4 months.
Nice.
So that's a pretty good return.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, there is work involved. It's more active, right?
100%.
You have to know what you're going to sell for, how much it's going to take to renovate, hold the property for that interim, and then do it all on private money, which is a higher cost, but then again, it's a higher return.
And to try to come in budget, and so making sure that you're pricing out everything well and not overdoing it, because some people, when they do a flip like this, they look at all of the fixtures and all that kind of stuff, and they think, well, if I was to live here, this is what I would want, and they'll go for a little bit more expensive, as opposed to recognizing that the property is just going to be sold. So let's go in with some of the most minimal, but still appealing things that people will like.
They need to know what exactly is the market appetite. For whatever they're creating.
And that area.
Yeah, for sure.
Because this is where that location really comes into play. Understanding the area very well will help you price accordingly for the best potential of success.
Now, that's a very active form of investing. right?
Very
But there are more passive forms of investing as well, like maybe investing in real estate, but through a REIT,
yes.
right? Now, the REIT instead could be holding properties, or maybe it is participating in the financing of such real estate.
Yep. Yep.
REITs tend to sort of, or by the tax structure, are supposed to give out their entire income or most of their income at the end of the year in the form of dividends
Mhm.
to the shareholders. So that's how you get a return by participating in a REIT.
It's kind of like a shared program where a group of people will all pull their money into somebody else purchasing and managing a property, and then everybody sort of shares in the profits and the good things that come out of that.
Yeah.
The passivity is that you don't have to go to the property to kick somebody out or to find out if you're going to have a good tenant or not. You can just let it be somebody else's problem.
Yes.
So my understanding and maybe the takeaway on this is if you're going to be a little bit more active and take on more of the risk of flipping or managing your own property, you can certainly benefit more by being that person. But when you're getting involved in a REIT or real estate investment trust like this, you may forego some of the profits, but you don't have to do as much.
Yes, it's a very, very passive form of participating in an investment scheme.
Yeah. Yeah.
So REITs are more bigger structures where maybe you're participating with hundreds or maybe even thousands of other investors.
Yeah.
But you could also look at something like a joint venture or more of a syndicated deal,
Yeah.
where you're participating in a venture with limited set of investors.
Yes.
Maybe you are the money partner and somebody else is the active partner, right? So that is another way we can invest. Maybe investment sizes would be higher than what you would need for a REIT.
Yeah.
But you may have more or greater control or influence without being active.
Yep. So for some of these scenarios that you just mentioned, Neil, if somebody was living in like Barrie, how would they find joint venture partners or other syndicate partners or these real estate investment trusts? What would you recommend?
Real estate investment trusts tend to be more bigger. They are more widely advertised. So if you're familiar with the stock market, maybe you can find a few of the bigger ones on that. Or if you're participating in real estate clubs, you might find that they're coming and presenting certain options or investment opportunities that you might be interested in or want find worth pursuing.
Yeah.
So those are some ways. If you're looking for more active partners that you want to sort of join with and look at investing or buying real estate, then again, real estate clubs tend to be good fertile grounds for those. But again, the important thing is doing your due diligence in terms of who you are engaging with, what is their track record in terms of not just performing and making money for themselves, but also how good are they in having a partnership with somebody.
Yeah. And do you get along with them?
Yes, exactly. It's you need to be sure that with whom you are engaging into some kind of partnership.
Yeah.
It's some sort of a marriage.
It is. I mean, where money's involved, you still want to have a very clear head and understand what the relationship is and be very, very clear about it. Because I don't think you want to go in and just offer up money and not have things be very clear between parties. So contracts are good. Have lawyers look after them. Having a good power team to support you through the process, a mortgage broker, a lawyer, even looking when you're involved in this real estate world, even looking at appraisers and contractors and people who can really give you some good sound advice about the investment and the process that you're getting yourself involved in.
Exactly. Now, there is another form of investing or making money off real estate, which is private lending.
Yep.
Now, private lending can involve you giving money in the form of a mortgage, which is secured under real estate, or it could be even in the form of hard money loans like promissory notes.
Yep.
Mhm.
So if I'm going to say anything on this right away, the first thing that I would recommend is consider being the mortgage person if you have the funds available. And if you're looking at doing something hard money, what Neil just talked about knowing who you're doing it with, and really understanding the market, because if you're just throwing your money in thinking that, hey, this is a great return, I'm going to let somebody else manage it all, be aware that you need to have a good understanding of what you're doing.
Yeah, you need to have an understanding of the risk profile.
Yeah.
You need to have a clear view of how much the other person is leveraged, because these are things that you cannot track of a credit report.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, be cautious. That's the message, I guess.
Be very cautious. And like I said before, seek advice. If somebody comes up to you on the street and says, hey, I've got a set of speakers in the back of my truck, you know what's going on, right? So if somebody says, hey, I've got a deal and I need X amount of cash, like, ask for details, look for the legitimacy of what's being offered. And again, I can't say it enough. Seek advice. If you feel uncomfortable about it, just pass it. Just don't do it. You don't have to. Nobody is twisting your arm. Be comfortable with the investments that you invest in.
So I think you have given a good overview of what investing in real estate can provide. You talked about all the goody things.
Yeah.
Maybe let's talk about the not so good things or the risks involved with real estate.
Yeah.
And let me start with market volatility. I think the environment that we are in sort of speaks to that, right? We are in an environment where property prices are not increasing, or we have maybe only decrease this year.
Yep.
Interest rates have risen, making borrowing much more difficult, qualification much more difficult, servicing your mortgage payments a bit more challenging, depending on the kind of property you might have. So, tough environment in general, right? Again, this doesn't pursue or persist for long, but it's a phase that somebody who is invested in real estate should be able to sustain and come out of it.
Yes. Yeah, you don't want to do this with like all of your eggs in the one basket. You want to at least have something else going on, or at least have an emergency fund that you can dip into if needed when these high prices or hard times do come out, because you have to budget for it. I don't think that it's responsible for somebody who's investing in real estate to just simply think all will be good all the time. You need to make sure that you have something to fall back on, just in case these tough times do happen, because as we're seeing, they do happen.
Yes. And when things go wrong, generally more than one thing goes wrong.
Yeah. It's not just high interest rates. It's the ability to sell the property, or, maybe you get a bad tenant, because those things do happen. And when you I have a friend who has an investment property in Halifax, and the first person that he had renting there, and the plan of this property for him is he's eventually going to move into it. So he bought it early with the potential to eventually move into it. But his first tenant got caught smoking in the building a couple of times, and he was getting the letters and stuff. So there was a lot of back and forth. And after a while, he basically had to do an eviction, which is not good. But doing that from here in Burlington, where I am, and having to communicate all that stuff, and then even fly out to deal with some of the legal sides of things in Halifax, is a pain. The second person he got in was great, beautiful, lovely older lady and everything, until he just got the notice that she's being moved into long-term care. And so these sorts of things can happen. And they're not necessarily anybody's fault or whatever. It's just part of the game, if you will, of owning real estate investments. So things to think about. And they're not bad. They're just things that you need to deal with and prepare for.
Absolutely. So you touched upon liquidity risk, which is the inability to sort of cash out at short notice,
Yeah.
and at an inexpensive cost, right? Because not only it takes time to sell a property, but it also costs a lot to sell a property.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's the downside when you sell an investment property? What's the thing that everybody's been talking about this year?
Well, it depends on the regulation, right? One is if it's an investment property which is tenanted,
yeah,
then your market kind of reduces because maybe you're not looking to market at people who want to buy it as their primary home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. There could be other investors who do not want to take over tenants.
Yeah.
Or the rent on the property is lower than the market rate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So all of these can pose challenges in just being able to liquidate that asset at a time of your choosing.
Yes. And
then
the
general demand in the market, right? If we are trying to sell in an environment like we are in today, then obviously you're not going to get the asking price that you had in mind. Mm-hmm. Notwithstanding the time it takes to just sell that off.
Yeah.
Well, possible.
Yeah.
And it's something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, we're going to get into it in the next part, but just when talking about some of the management challenges. But before I go there on the liquidity, one of the things, if you do sell a property, if you are lucky enough to sell it in the challenging time, you still have the tax consequences as well. Mm-hmm. So things to think about.
Yes. And regulations change, right? Like we were surprised with the capital gain tax changes earlier this year. The budget 2024 came up with that change, and it affects you differently whether you're holding in a corporation versus holding it directly.
Yes.
So again, these are surprises that you should be able to withstand.
Yes, yes, and so researching ahead of time and knowing what you're getting into, I can't stress that enough.
Mm-hmm. You touched upon management challenges, mm-hmm. which is finding good tenants.
Yep.
And keeping them.
Yes.
Tenanted.
Yep.
Property maintenance is something that you would have to keep up with as long as you hold the property. Either you can do it yourself, or you should at least engage somebody else to do that on your behalf. If it's a property that you cannot access, you don't have the time, it's just too remote for you, and many other reasons.
Yeah. I think there is something that I came across when I first got into this industry that sort of wasn't clear to me, maybe as well as it could have been, but it was allowing for something called quiet possession. When you rent a property to somebody, you rent the property to somebody. And that doesn't mean that you can go over there every 5 minutes and complain to them about, the garbage that they left on the driveway or something like that, because it could get to a point where it's deemed like harassment. So you have to be comfortable with your ability to handle those situations, both internally and with whoever is managing the property, whether that be you or another property manager.
Exactly. Yeah. And then dealing with legal issues as and when they arise, right? Maybe you have a tenant who is not paying you rent.
Yeah.
Or who has damaged the property. So how do you deal with all those things? You need to have the know-how, or at least know somebody who knows about it, who handles such situations. Well, as mortgage brokers, we can obviously look at from a financing standpoint, what is it that somebody is going to be eligible for?
Yes.
And eligibility varies quite a bit depending on which bank or lender that we approach.
What happens if we can't find like a Scotia or TD bank for that client? Are there other opportunities?
Oh yes, there are a number of lenders that you could look at.
Yeah.
And again, depending on the scenario, it may or may not make sense.
Yep.
But at least approaching a broker will give you insight in terms of at least what the options are.
Yep.
Going to your bank may not give you the entire picture of what is feasible.
Chances are it probably wouldn't unless you have an exceptional person that you deal with at the branch. And by exceptional, I mean they need to understand not just their own bank's policies, but other banks' policies as well. Mm-hmm. And this is where Neil and I come in. For anybody who's listening, we don't understand just one lender's policy. We have our Our company, Mortgage Alliance, dealt with over 88 different lenders last year. And I think personally, like Neil and I, probably had at least more than 20 ourselves. So we deal with multiple lenders all the time. And we understand the policies and know strategically how to help people make the best use of the lenders at what time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, talking about lenders, there is another risk which we should maybe touch upon, which is the risk of over leverage or managing your debts in general.
And the thing that I would probably add to that as well is that it's not always going to be like it is today, either in the market or your personal situation, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at real estate investing, in any case, whether you're purchasing, whether you're getting involved through joint venture, whether you're providing mortgage money for loans, your situation could change year to year. And so being aware of your own path is helpful, as well as being aware of what's going on in the market. So that's it for today's episode of Getting Your Shit Together. I hope this gave you a clear picture of what it takes to get started in real estate investing. We talked about why real estate is a powerful asset class and a tool, and the different types of properties and investment approaches, and some of the risks and rewards that come with it. If you're new to this, remember that you don't have to dive in head first. Start small, do your research, and don't be afraid to ask for help from experienced investors or professionals. Real estate can be an incredibly lucrative tool for building wealth, but like any investment, it's all about the planning and execution. Thanks for tuning in. And if you like this episode, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who's thinking about moving in the investment world. As always, if you have questions or if you have topics that you'd like us to talk about, let us know. Reach out to either Neil or myself, and we'll put them in future episodes. Until next time, take care and keep working on getting your shit together.